Good afternoon, Southern Institutions. It's Thursday, January 26th, and we have a whole room full here today, which is always nice. And we're going to start out today's conversation with Julie Moore, Secretary for Agency of Natural Resources. And who'd you bring with you?
So with me this afternoon, Maggie. All right. So Chris Herrick, who is the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. John Beeling, who is the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. Eric Blatt, who is in our Water Investment Division, but also sort of the capital bill lead for the agency. So he is probably the most important person of all of us for you to know.
Sure.
And then Danielle Fitzko, who is the Interim Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation.
Glad to all have you here.
Thank you for having us. Let's see, I'm trying to bring up.
Commissioner left, right? You moved on to Commissioner of Forest Park.
Correct. Michael retired at the end of last calendar year.
For an electrical company or where do you go?
You think he really is retired?
Oh, retired,
Truly
okay.
retired
I
at the
thought
moment.
you were talking to the other.
Oh, Peter Walk
Yeah.
was the DEC commissioner at the beginning of last session, and he is now the Director of Efficiency Vermont.
Just trying to bring up my slides so that I'm looking at what you're looking at. Oh, that was the wrong one. My apologies. Just one more minute and I'll have it up. So my understanding is, and you can correct me if that's incorrect, is that A&R has one of the more complicated capital bills of any of the departments of state government. So we do actually have components of capital funding in each of our three departments, as well as we are often considered the lead when it comes to clean water funding. That is an interagency effort, but the budget is sort of stewarded, I would offer, by the Agency of Natural Resources. And so my thought would be to present all of that information to you all today.
Yep.
So I thought because there's several new members, maybe just a little bit of background on the agency would be helpful, and then I'll actually turn it over to the commissioners to speak to their specific portions of the budget. The Agency of Natural Resources has about 650 full-time employees at this point. We have staffed up some as a result of the really significant amount of federal funding that has come to us under ARPA and more recently the bipartisan infrastructure law to support work particularly related to drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater, but also around forest action planning. In addition, as you may know, we are responsible for the operation of Vermont's 55 state parks, and we add about 400 seasonal employees each summer in order to be able to fully staff the parks. The agency really has a range of different functions and activities. Most of them are evident in our name, from the management of game and non-game fish and wildlife species for the benefit of Vermonters, habitat conservation work that stretches between the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation, supporting forests in Vermont, which is the vast majority, obviously, of our landscape, as well as that increasing attention we're seeing on outdoor recreation opportunities and helping both communities build out trail networks, but also connect through state lands. The Department of Environmental Conservation is the largest of the three departments, and it serves most of the regulatory functions you would think of in the natural resources space, air, water, and waste, and represents about half the staff of the agency. More recently, the Secretary's office, where I sit, has historically been some financial services staff, legal services staff, and then a really small secretary's team. With the passage of last year's budget, we did create a climate office inside the Secretary's office to support the tracking and measuring progress that's needed as a part of the Global Warming Solutions Act, as well as creating an environmental justice unit. And as you may recall, this body passed what is now Act 154 last session that put A&R in a leadership role in helping push forward a set of policies around environmental justice throughout the state government. So we're in a little bit of a transition space in the Secretary's office, having programs for the first time in quite some while. Happy to pause there and answer any questions you may have about the work of the agency. And if you don't have any, I will turn it over to Commissioner Herrick to talk about his budget first.
Just one, just because I've been there before, Groton State Forest, where they have at the end of the road, they have a place to stay there.
Stay on Lodge?
Yes, Stay on Lodge, is that you?
That is us.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was a wonderful experience. I was glad to be there. My brother got married there, so I was glad I wasn't, I was glad I was just a guest.
Yes.
We had a great time up
No,
there. They did
it's a lovely
they did a wonderful job and, yeah.
Thank you.
Nice place.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so Chris, you want to swap seats with me? I'm happy to
Sure.
leave if you
I
want.
brought papers.
You brought
I'm old
papers.
school.
All right.
Sorry.
No,
Not very environmental of me.
it's good for the forest products industry.
Yes.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Christopher Herrick, Commissioner of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so I'm just going to go over capital budget, but if there are any questions at any time, because I tend to talk and talk and talk, as Senator Matt and I were just remarking, we both have the gift of gab. So feel free to stop me anytime.
It does, yes, yeah. Does he speak highly of you?
Down, so.
I'm in Grand Isle.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's important to note that the secretary mentioned, and I'll reiterate, that when you look at ownership by state government of land, Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife is one of the biggest landowners. And so while these numbers might seem big, when you consider the number of WMAs, fish culture stations, and other buildings that we have required to maintain all the WMA, and the WMAs are wildlife management areas, I apologize. It's a lot just to keep it up. And so as we move through this, that's kind of the frame of reference I'd like you to keep in mind. So just go over some of the past projects that we've done in improving public access to wildlife management areas. Significant road improvements were made along 10 miles of road in the Bill Sladek Wildlife Management Area. You're familiar with that, Senator?
Very, yeah, very.
Up in Norton and Holland. And these new road improvements will greatly enhance the public's ability to enjoy this 11,000 acre WMA. And what part of what we did there is we made the road somewhat more accessible, so you don't need a four-wheel drive truck necessarily, as the hunting community might be aging a little bit, present company accepted. And we also want to make it more accessible for folks with disabilities. We created a new wildlife viewing boardwalk at the Wenlock and Victory WMAs in the towns of Brunswick and Victory. These boardwalks are proven to be a popular destination for bird watchers and nature enthusiasts. And they are designed to be ADA compliant. And then construction of a wildlife viewing tower down at the Dead Creek WMA. How many folks have been to the Dead Creek WMA? It's amazing. You should go. We'll take a ride in your effect. It is absolutely stunning. It's in Addison.
Yeah, down by Panton or whatever,
Yeah.
out through there, yeah.
If you go during goose migratory season, there are tens of thousands of snow and Canada geese.
So up in the cornfields there, they.
Well, yeah, and the water, there's waterways down there. You can't boat.
in the cornfields there.
Just can't-
Well, so we mow these fields specifically for them. That's part of our wildlife management work. So we put in a tower that overlooks these fields that draw the large flocks. And this tower is ADA compliant as well. So that's a significant improvement and allows more access for Vermonters. And then improvement and expansion of the parking areas at the numerous WMAs in the Middlesex Notch, Eagle Point, Roaring Brook, South Stream, among others. So when you look at that line item, those are the kind of projects that we foresee doing over the next few years. It's important for the public to have access to wildlife management areas. Senator, you look like you want to ask a question.
No, I'm just listening.
Okay.
Can you talk about the geographic distribution of those?
Yes, they're all over the state.
Okay.
And I will bring a book in. It has all the WMAs listed.
Great.
It's like an atlas. And so let me just make a note so I don't forget.
Thank you.
So Commissioner, do you find that throughout the state that we're finding more properties are getting posted so that the public, I know when it's private ownership and such that you should ask permission or always ask permission, but there's no land posted in Vermont unless it's actually posted. Are you finding more land getting posted where it's restricting public access throughout the state?
I think I would be speculating to answer that question. Because it's not a state registered activity, it's done in the towns. And so, if you listen to anecdotal stories, you hear that there probably are somewhat more, but I don't have any evidence to say one way or the other.
And I guess where I was going with that is that it's just nice to see the state taking an active role as far as opening up some of the lands that we do have, so that the public can get out there and enjoy. I mean, this wildlife management, what you're just talking about with the tower is, you can't imagine that there's just that many geese in the world when they decide to come in there at that time. It's just an impressive sight to see. And even something as the moose platforms that we have up in Essex County, it's not just a moose that you're going to go out and see. It's the birds. And sometimes it's just going out there and just hearing the quiet. So to be able to access that area is amazing.
It's funny you should say that, and I'll digress for a minute. One of my favorite places is up in Canaan. Actually, it's probably in Leamington. You drive over the Christmas tree farm and drop down into a valley. And every time I'm at camp, when it's not like this, I take my dog and I just let her go. And you can be there for 45 minutes and never hear a human-made sound.
Yeah.
And that is a rarity in the world. And so I value that. That's one of where I go sometimes when I get a little stressed out. But the WMAs, I would also reiterate, they're for every Vermonter. It's not just for hunting. People are using them for all activities. And that's really important. And we're doing great habitat work in there, habitat restoration, conservation of lands. It's really amazing work. And I will also mention birds, animals, and the beautiful plants that we have. The flora in the state of Vermont is spectacular in the summertime. It's the smells and the views are just great. Thank you for letting me brag on our WMA. And I'll get you an atlas so you can visit.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the next area, the access area infrastructure improvements. So I'll just list a few examples and I'll move along because I don't want to take up my colleagues' time. New and improved boat launch at Joe's Pond. That was a significant improvement. Improved canoe and kayak access along the Otter Creek. So there's almost like a kayaking or canoeing trail. So you can put in and pick up at a different spot. And it's just a beautiful spot. It's down near Dead Creek. And then ongoing efforts to make more access areas ADA compliant. So out near your area, Senator, on the Lamoille River on Bear Trap, we have an ADA compliant dock as well, and you can fish off it if you're utilizing perhaps a wheelchair. So we're trying to do that in more places around the state, to just remembering that we are here working for every homeowner all the time.
Can I just double check where we are? So we're on page 55 of this.
I'm not.
Yeah, I was trying to,
Yeah.
Spreadsheet here.
so where,
At page 1 or 4 on the spreadsheet.
right, but we're partway through this, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
I'm going by this,
Okay.
just, and that's, I think that's.
So we have a lot of ponds that are frozen this year, they're like.
Well, it's slow coming in.
There's no ice people that are ice fishing at all.
Well, there are people ice fishing up my way. I noticed them off of the sandbar. Like you said,
Yeah.
we were talking earlier, the Ben Alex Bay is frozen in. And I double checked we have a free ice fishing day tomorrow, and we're having a festival down at, I keep calling it Sterling, it's not Sterling, it's Silver Lake down in Barton, I think it. And we're gonna have we already know we're gonna have 300 people. So they're checking the ice. But I know that some places aren't as frozen.
Hockey, we have a pond hockey here. They don't know what's gonna happen because if they become your life area for.
They might move it up to a different area. So.
That's a good weekend.
So we're gonna continue to do that kind of work at our fishing access areas. Infrastructure maintenance, improvement of fish and wildlife buildings, including the conservation camps, which there are 2. We are the state, I mentioned the 2 largest property owners with building, one of them with buildings needing support, and that's for regular maintenance. I mean, you do regular maintenance on your house, and we have a ton of buildings that we need to upgrade, make sure the roof isn't leaking, and that's, for instance, we're replacing the storage barn that was raised down at Dick Creek because of safety concerns. We have to protect the equipment that we have down there. And the conservation camps is a big one. We have 2, Buck Lake and Kehoe. We run a number of kids through there in the summer. It's a very affordable camp. I believe that the price is $250 a week. Try to find that anywhere.
They get to stay there.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
and we feed them.
Wow.
And we have great counselors. It's a great program. And but we need to make sure that the roof doesn't leak, or else the whole building's going to become compromised. The road going into Buck, you need 4-wheel drive to get in and out of there right now. So we want to take care of that to make sure. But I do want to mention too with these camps, we offer a lot of scholarships too. So that cost should not be a barrier for those who want to participate.
Do you have those on your website or somewhere? That's how I can find out.
Okay, and registration is open now.
Okay.
If you know somebody who wants to go.
Yeah.
Sonna, did you want to go to camp?
His wife wants to paint the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, the
It does. It does.
senator wants to take the youth day hunting, so.
How about a novice mentor?
Yeah, there you go.
So that's the kind of work that we would do there. And then the hatchery improvements. We have 5 fish culture stations around the state. In the past, we've made significant improvements at these, including, and these are just a sampling, improving the raceways at the Bennington one, piping at Ed Weed, which is up in Grand Isle. Salisbury septic system needed to be replaced. In the Bennington residents needed to be upgraded. Each one of these has residences because we have staff there 24 hours a day. If the water stops flowing, the temperature gets out of whack, we lose the bird stock, and that's a huge investment. And these are really dedicated people we have here. So we want to make sure that the locations that they're working, the places that they're working are up to snuff.
What's the brood stock? Are we raising our own eggs and hatching them out, or?
So yes, and I'll tell you the one that is kind of, there's 2 things that are interesting. Well, there's 1,000 things that are interesting, 2 that I'll highlight. The salmon in Lake Champlain, they breed them there from the eggs. They express the eggs and then they fertilize them, raise them, and then they release them up at Van Nuys, which is up the road from Ed Weed. And they release them. And the fish, when it's time to breed, come back to the stream that's the effluent from the fish hatchery. And they swim up the stream, and we have a trap there that catches them, and we use them for the broodstock. So I asked our biologists, how do they know? They didn't go down the stream.
Right.
How do they know? And they surmise, and they're pretty sure, it's the smell of the water that they're brought right back to where, so that's how it is in nature. It's very impressive. The scientists working on here, if you spent an hour in here, it would be like one of those master classes that you take. I get to have master classes, I don't know. I mean, you know, there's only so much stuff you can put in here anyway, it's full of nonsense, but these people are brilliant. And I'm honored to work with them and for them, doing this so they can do their amazing work. So moving forward just a little bit, we're looking at, this is a list of projects that we're looking at for the fish culture stations. You don't have this,
Okay.
but I can highlight some of them. Frontline Pond Rehab Project, a roof leak above raceways. That's at Weed, replace roof membrane on the main hatchery building up in Weed, electrical control and switch gear. So those are the kind of projects that we're looking at to make sure that we can continue. I did say I had two things. The other is lake trout, and we work with UVM on a cooperative research project, and one that we're considering is studying lake trout in Lake Champlain, because we believe there's a chance that we may be able to reduce our breeding of lake trout because they are reproducing naturally in the wild, which is a huge success story.
So we have in the lamprey problem under control enough to where we can gain numbers now on those.
Glad
fish?
you mentioned that. A report came out this about a month ago, I believe. And the wounding rate is significantly below the target or where it's been. And so we're seeing success for that. It is a long-term project. It's not one where you treat 1 year and suddenly it's a success. Lamprey have a 4-year life cycle. And so we're starting to see the fruits of that effort. It is a cooperative effort with Vermont, New York, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Yes.
You know, this committee is very supportive of the walleye folks that come in every year. We give them 25,000 a year,
Yes.
and they do wonderful work. I just thought what your comment is on it, because that's what it is.
Yeah, we have a good cooperative relationship with them. And
Dedicated people.
they are, and something that's cool happening in the Chittenden Reservoir is walleye. We've been stocking walleye in there. And we're actually making that a test water. And we're changing the size of walleye because we believe they're now breeding in the wild in the Chittenden Reservoir. So that's that cooperative effort. The scientists really reviewing the information, and we follow the science. I think that needs to be stated very clearly on everything we do. And you know, right now we're talking about fish, but all the other things, it's science-based. And this is just another example of Fish and Wildlife following science.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Go to the hatchery. You ever been to hatcheries? Any of the hatcheries are long. You got very, very interesting. So they do a lot. It's amazing. Millions of little fish that they raise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Chris, the Bethel hatchery had a lot of damage from Irene. Has that been all rehabbed?
That's the national fish.
Okay. Oh, that's right. It's federal.
And yeah, I believe it has. I can double check, but that's my understanding.
Yeah. No, I just wondered.
And as far as, was it national too that we used to do the landlocked salmon and the Connecticut, or?
That's correct.
That's national. Okay.
Yeah, and that project somewhat changed.
Yeah.
For us in the Connecticut River, for a lot of reasons. And I can come back at another time or bring somebody smarter than me to talk about it.
As far as the waterways and stuff, I mean, we have these fish breeding and we have them, you know, we have them doing what they're supposed to do. And we're getting them started and all that stuff. And they don't do that in dirty water. Are our waters in good shape in the state of Vermont?
I think I'm less qualified to speak to that than DEC.
Okay.
But anecdotally, Lake Wallace looks great.
Yeah.
And Lake Champlain, where I live.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my drinking water, so I am invested in that.
I know in our day, it was beautiful in front of the Lake Champlain. There's no algae, It's really unbelievable how clean it is there. Yeah, I got 27 miles of shoreline in my district, well, just in Colchester.
Right.
So it's, yeah, you never see any green algae or anything. The St. Albans, I guess, is worse. I think we're making progress a little bit of time.
Can I answer any other questions?
So the work in the Connecticut River is somebody else.
No, we're part of a group. But the Connecticut River is actually owned by New Hampshire.
Right.
But we have an interest, of course, we have a vested interest in that. And so we have our fisheries folks have representatives on the Connecticut River group that meets and talks about the fishery that's in there.
That's great. And then the dams are being recertified with the FERC process. That might not be you, but I would think somebody somewhere in A&R would be commenting on that. Okay.
I don't mean to turf it to you, but that's not me, right?
Okay, so yeah, I can
Well,
find out.
We'll have them.
Those darn dams.
I know, damn dams.
Any other questions?
No.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh, I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, you know where to get a hold of me.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Very much.
Chris.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
You're good.
We're not doing dams yet, that's next.
Yeah.
For the record, my name is Danielle Fitzko, I go by Danny, and I'm the interim commissioner for the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. I'm a new face here, but I have been with the department for 20 years. So thank you for having us in here, and I can give you a high-level overview of our capital request for 24 and 25. And I just want to kind of give you a little overview like Julie did for A&R. We're really fortunate in FPR that our title really kind of tells us what we do. We're forests. We protect the health and keep forests intact and sustainably managed. We are state parks. We create experiences and memories of getting outdoors. And we are outdoor recreation, meeting the increasing demand and diversification of outdoor recreation across Vermont. The capital funds we requested support the public access to nearly 200,000 acres of public lands that FPR manages. The funds support health and well-being, our communities and our culture. And what our public lands offer is really the backbone of Vermont's forest and recreation economies. In many ways, and I know I am completely biased, but I think what FPR offers is really what makes Vermont so special. The investment that we make in FPR's public lands is relevant today for the future. Our service across the state is dispersed. When our state parks were developed, the intent was that there be a state park close by to every Vermonter. And that dispersed nature of our state parks and our state land means that our economic activities really disperse throughout the state, creating jobs. A lot of money goes into trades, engineers, architects. From Maidstone up in the Northeast Kingdom to Woodford to Albert to Fort Dummer, this investment creates economic activity and opportunity that spans across Vermont. When I talk about the capital investments, I'm going to put them into really two categories. We have 6 line items. One category, which I'll start with first, is really our state parks, so our designated state parks, and then the other area will be outside of our designated state parks. So our state parks, we have 3 capital requests that directly support the infrastructure of our state parks. We have 56 state parks. Oh, yes.
So I'm updating that number for you. And I hope you will agree, I hope you've all been to one of our, what we think are world-class state parks that are across the state. This past year, we had nearly 1.2 million visitors during our operating season. And that just completely explodes when you think about when we're not operating.
How was that compared to last year? What's the trend?
So over the past 5 years, we've seen a 40% increase. Last year, we hit about 1.1 million. So we are seeing a huge increase. And I think you'll probably all are aware that outdoor recreation increase is happening everywhere. And we're absolutely seeing it here in Vermont since the pandemic. And then we're still seeing that trend continuing.
no, actually, that was my next talking point, so thank you.
Sandbar is still one of the top ones.
Sandbar is one of the top ones for day use area, absolutely. Yeah, it's easy, close access to a lot of people. And
How many camping sites would you say that we have throughout? the state?
2,200 camping sites
2,200.
throughout.
And is it still at times of the year they're booked? for-
Oh, yeah, there's, you know, we have updated our reservation system, so if you haven't booked the site recently, you can actually frequently visit it, and if someone, you know, decides to cancel, you can get in there pretty quickly. So we do have a robust reservation system that, you know, like in live time almost book. So those hot days, sometimes they do become available if you're watching them.
And the cabins, the primitive cabins that we funded in the past, those are still popular. We're looking to put more of those. up.
Yeah, cabins are great. We built out the ones in Queechee. We have another set coming on this field season. We're really seeing it, and we need to sort of meet this change in demand that people really like cabins. We're seeing an aging or older generation coming to the state parks, and they like some of those accommodations, so we're meeting that. So yeah, and we're working with Rutland Tech Center to actually help build those cabins for us with us.
Oh, nice. Because and historically, we were trying to put them in underperforming tent sites, and now we still looking for those underperforming sites to maximize.
Yeah,
the
it's the
opportunity.
return on the investment, yes, yeah. And they are popular and pretty much first to get booked.
Yeah.
It's great.
And they're no electricity at all, or?
No, I do think I can't answer that actually for sure, but you know, we should, eventually, I'm hoping you'll want to bring some of our staff in from state parks that can really give you the finer details.
I think we might do that.
Yeah, they know the ins and outs, and they help me. Okay, so our first item under state parks is called general infrastructure and maintenance. I don't know if you're aware of this, but our state park system is the third largest infrastructure asset in state government with over $280 million. To give you a flavor of sort of the assets that we have in state parks, which were mostly built in the 30s and 60s, so they're historic. We have 500,000 structural square footage, 36 public water systems, 100 wastewater systems, 40 miles of underground water and wastewater piping, and hundreds of culverts and bridges. The requested funds to help us maintain and modernize our park system is really about making sure that we're thinking about the future and fixing up what we have. Vermont State Parks, we talk about recreation as an engine, and being so dispersed all over the state, we estimate that another $100 million economic activities that's really supporting local communities. So there are 4 major categories in this general maintenance. There's smaller scale projects, think roofs, electrical systems, fixtures. We have our wastewater improvement systems, probably not that exciting, but absolutely necessary. We have our transportation system, bridges and culverts, and larger scale projects like bathrooms and showers. So that's one category. The next category, investing in our state parks, is for 2 maintenance and operations facilities that are really currently failing. These are not public-facing facilities. They support public-facing assets for really half of our state parks. The way we manage our state parks, we do 4 regions. So this would be rebuilding 2 of our maintenance facilities. So almost 60 parks would be supported by the maintenance facility. And it also houses workspace for our incredibly talented team that keeps our parks up to date all year round, and then a couple hundred during the operating season. So without a function maintenance and operating facilities, we're kind of really inefficient and can't meet the demands that are needed. And then the last category for our state parks is upgrading our stormwater system to meet the 3-acre stormwater rule. We are part of the regulated community and must meet the requirements to protect clean water. And we have 119 acres of impervious footprint that in 19 of our state parks. So we need to meet the 3-acre requirement in those areas. And we have a plan in place, and these funds will help us get us there on time. So that's sort of our state parks bucket of requests.
Can you just briefly go over the 3-acre rule?
I can even have DEC do that, but
Okay.
basically, if there's it's to me, if you have over 3 acres of impervious surface, you need to implement stormwater management practices to capture and filter the stormwater. To remove fluids.
More job.
I got it, I guess. Okay, so the next set of capital requests is another bucket, and think about, we have 56 designated state parks, but then we have 200,000 acres of FPR managed lands that this funds would support. That bring in millions of Vermonters and visitors across the state. And again, we talked about people are coming in droves to explore our Green Mountains have to offer. And so this investment will accommodate the use that we're seeing and also help us protect the resource or the impact that use really does have. So the first bucket we're calling open access recreation infrastructure. And this investment provides the necessary infrastructure to support the people coming to state lands. For example, we recently had to invest heavily in the south end of Willoughby in Westmore. If you've been to Lake Willoughby, it's absolutely fantastic, and people love it, and they're coming. It's very heavily used. Now, this is outside of a fee-based park, and so we just invested in expanding the road. The parking, accessible trails, toilet buildings. So that's just one example. We also have heavy use and safety issues in some of our popular swimming holes, like Hamilton Falls in Jamaica and Bigham Falls in Stowe. So we need to make investments to control, to really managing the people and the impact. And then we also have probably 8 fire towers on state lands. And we just really want to make sure that they're safe. People love them. They climb for the view, but there needs to be investment. They're historical structures, and we have some safety concerns. So these are the places that are just loved. We don't want them to be loved to death. So that's where that investment would go to.
Just a quick thing on the terminology. So it's open access, that title means places that you don't control the access to. There's no
Right.
gate or.
Open to the public. Yes, there's no gate.
Okay.
No fees associated. We have lots. Actually, I just got a stat. We have 600 miles of trails on FPR land. And they're just we're grateful. People love it. But we need to invest in managing that.
You sell a lot of timber, you sell timber up.
Absolutely, we have a forest management program on state lands. We probably are a small percentage of the state. But we do have a forest management plan with our goals of wildlife management. There is certainly timber that we get off of that. There's lots of reasons we manage, but we do have an active forest management program.
Yes.
So the Jamaica site, I am familiar.
Oh,
with it.
yeah.
It's beautiful, but it's also pretty dangerous.
Yes.
So I guess our insurance covers.
Yeah, we have immunity as big state,
Okay.
but we do want to make improvements there. So we actually are investing right now in a master plan for the site, and what's going to come out of that is, how do we make it safer for visitors? Because like in Bigham Falls, similar, lots of people go there, and we just want to make it so they can actually see the falls from a safe distance, and those who do want to get down, they can get down there safely. So that's
That's a challenge, I'm sure, because one reason people like it is because it's so dangerous.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And our plan, where these are huge investments. South end of Willoughby is almost $2 million, and Bigham Falls is going to come in at 1.1 to make it safely accessible. So
Wow.
it's just it's important that we do it, but it's at a cost.
Willoughby on a busy day is just an impressive amount of people that are there up on those hills. Hiking, and there's cars there that are, if I said there was 400 cars, I probably missed them 200. It's just there's trails they walk up through,
Swimming,
and
boating.
as the commissioner said, they're probably, without the structure of the state coming in, probably using it to death.
Yeah.
So it needs to be, it needs more structure there.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing now. I'd love to bring in pictures for you. And then we're actually now, these are areas we're not expecting needed to be staffed, but we do have to have staff presence there now. So that's another investment that we're making because of people management. So the next, I have two more buckets to go through under, we have implement best management practices at state forest and recreation access points. This one focuses on public access and use while also meeting water quality standards. As you can imagine, the increased use, we also are having like, we need to rehabilitate. We need to provide the access, but we're also having tremendous use, which will be causing erosion problems. We want to make sure we're protecting water quality. One example is Smuggler's Notch, that between Stowe and Cambridge, this area receives thousands of visitors a year. It's crowded with visitors searching for parking. So we've been investing in designated parking areas so you have public access, and then we're doing that, we're making sure we're meeting water quality standards. So it's a win-win. We get people access to state land, but we're also making sure that we're doing it in a way that's protecting water quality. Another example is the 5.5 mile Burroughs Trail in Duxbury up to the top of Camel's Hump. This has seen extreme use, and during the pandemic, it has widened quite a bit, over 6 feet apart. People were adhering to that on the trails. And so we're entered into a multi-year agreement with the Green Mountain Club, Vermont Conservation Corps, Northwood Stewardship Center, and the National Civilian Community Corps crew. And this past year, we fixed 128 hotspots to manage for erosion, and we have 170 more to go. That alone is costing us $1 million. So that's the type of investments that we've made with that pot of money. And then the last one is our forest and parks access infrastructure. FPR managed over 600 miles of linear infrastructure that again provides access to recreation and our working forest for forest management. The roads were built before modern standards, so early 20th century, maybe another infusion during the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 30s. And so we have a lot of modernization to do to get those up to standards. Secretary Moore is going to outline some clean water funds that we have directly to support those segments of roads that are hydrologically connected to streams so it can reduce the pollution loading. But we have miles in between those hydrologically connected areas that we need to improve the overall surface and functioning of the roads. These roads are important, like local commuting. There's like, I think, Coolidge State Forest between Shrewsbury and Plymouth. People commute back and forth, and they're just hot spots for tourists traveling. So that's the bucket for outside of state parks. So we have six requests in our budget request. So, any other questions?
Any other questions?
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, Commissioner, how are you?
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm John Beeling. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. A lot of people think of us as just being permit issuers, people who come after violators. That's certainly a lot of what we do. What a lot of people don't realize is a huge portion of what we do is actually support projects, support water projects specifically. So we've done a calculation. Last fiscal year, 2023, 36% of our budget went to grants and loans. And really what we're here to talk about today, this large portion of what we're talking about are supporting those projects. We are at an historic moment in this country and in this state in terms of water infrastructure funding. Eric Ladd, who's with us today, did a calculation back in the envelope. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, but he added up all the monies we received from the federal government for these types of projects since 1957. In the next 5 years, we're going to receive $70 billion more than that total amount. Just to give you some perspective. $70 million more.
So I had a B on there. I was like, oh.
70 billion would be great. A billion's still impressive.
Yes, it is.
And that's a long period of time. And it kind of gives you a sense of what's happened, honestly. This country has been neglecting these projects for far too long. And we're playing catch up. but we really need to get on a lot of these things. And that's what we're gonna do. And by doing this, by spending this money, we're leveraging enormous amounts of federal funding. So that's why this is so important. In order to get the money, we gotta spend the money, there's matching requirements.
When you talk about neglect, are you talking about lands that have been developed and the natural flow of water has been curtailed, it's not flowing naturally enough, or even in natural areas, helping some of the flow or the lay of the land?
It's more infrastructure related. It's just, it's, look at the city we're sitting in today. The water infrastructure in the city is in bad shape, all across the state, all across the country. We just haven't been spending the money. We have to, for both wastewater, drinking water. The other thing to remember about my department is, it's called environmental conservation. A huge amount of what we do is actually protecting public health. That's the goal here. That's the outcome. When you have safe drinking water, when you have proper waste disposal, that's really what we're all about. Obviously, we protect the natural environment. In doing so, we protect people. But I think people kind of forget, we really are a public health protection department in large part. We certainly want to protect the natural environment. That's a big part of our mission. But the types of things we're talking about today really relate to public health. So I was just going to take you through. There's 4 asks that I'm going to speak to. The first one, I'm going to start with the biggest one. It's on row 100. It's 27 million of one-time general fund from the capital expenditure cash fund. This is for multi-year grants, federal fiscal years 23 through 26. What these represent is a state match. I'm going to use the acronym BILL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. I can't pronounce the other one. It's just too much of a tongue twister. BILL is an easy one to say. But these will enable us to get matching funds. And just to give you a sense of perspective, the 5-year total, so these are both clean water and drinking water funds. The 5-year total federal funds that we can leverage with this is $348 million. So in order to get money, we got to spend money. Well worth it. Well worth it. A couple of points just to give you a sense of what these are for. All the state money and most of the federal money funds low interest loans to municipalities and certain eligible private entities for water infrastructure projects. A portion of the federal funds is for related DEC operating costs, includes loan administration, technical assistance in municipalities. That's very important to know. We have a lot of small towns, and it's not that easy to do this stuff. And so we're able to help them out and figure out how to solve their problems, and also program oversight. One of the requirements in these funds is that it includes a requirement that 49% of the general supplemental funds be provided as loan forgiveness. We're really trying to help people out because your water rates are going to go through the roof, your sewer rates are going to go through the roof if we can't forgive those kinds of loans. So we're trying to help just average citizens get the services they deserve and the public health protections they deserve. Moving on to any questions on that?
Yeah, these are great. I've been a municipal manager, and when I was with Rockingham Billis Falls, we did an upgrade, and they had just finished an upgrade on the wastewater system, and then we did the drinking water. But just the forgivable loans are amazing. And now, when you say you have technical support, we had a consultant, but so do you help towns who don't have consulting engineers?
Eric can probably answer that, right?
Right, for the record, Eric Blatt, Director of Engineering, Water Investment Division. Most of the technical assistance is provided with the set-asides that come out of the drinking water side for contracts. Not so much to do like preliminary engineering and design engineering for the communities, but it helps them with more operational type issues like leak detection, water conservation type practices. There's a host of initiatives that are funded with the set aside. We refer to as set asides, the chunk of money that we pull off the federal grant and put towards initiatives that help public water systems. That's the thing I would emphasize, that the drinking water money, the funds all go to public water systems. And there are certain private entities that are regulated as public water systems.
So
About 1,400 public water systems in Vermont, and about
1,400?
About 1,400, which is a large number for a small state. We have a lot of very small systems. about half of those are actually eligible to come into the fund. There's certain for-profit, non-community type systems, like in terms of office buildings that are not actually eligible. The biggest class of non-community systems that are eligible are schools. So we have about 150 schools in Vermont that are on their own water systems. They're qualified.
And we have a lot of communities putting in public water systems now.
New ones, no. But we do have one really large one that's emerging, that's in town of Jones.
Yeah.
They're dealing with the PFAS problem, basically. So there are a bunch of smaller public water systems that'll ultimately get consolidated into one larger system.
Will that be wastewater as well, or is that just drinking?
They have wastewater for part of the area. I don't know the exact limits of it, but this is strictly a drinking water project, and it's a multi-million, it's 33 million range project. Yeah.
So just one other question then, like, if I can call somebody offline to just, because I have a ton of questions about this from y'all's perspective. But the, this additional funding, how many more towns do you think will be able to get systems? And do you have the just capacity in your organization to make that happen?
Right, so I can describe the cycle a little bit. So we receive these annual grants from EPA, which the 340 billion is essentially the aggregate of five sets of grants that we're getting each year for 5 years, and 2 other grants that we get, which we've been getting since on the clean water side since the 1987, on the drinking water side since 1997. We refer to those as our base annual SRF grants. This new round of funding that we're getting is commonly referred to as supplemental funding because it's supplemental to what we've been getting all these years from the fund. Every year, we put together a priority list. We solicit applications. It's happening as we speak. And we get the applications in at the end of February. We rank all these projects, both clean water and drinking water, separate priority lists. And depending on how much funding we have available for that particular list, we'll fund X number of projects. And to answer your question, generally we're in several dozen projects that are funded.
And as part of this 27 million too, you heard of for private home systems and stuff. Is that a different program?
Yes, it's not covered by this because it's not public water.
Just to give you a perspective, any system that serves 25 or more customers in Vermont is considered a public drinking water system. So some of them are very small.
I know.
Pretty much every mobile home park, things of that nature, those are considered public drinking water systems. That's one reason the numbers are high.
Go ahead.
I don't know if anybody can answer this. I could hear every year Burlington overflowing into the lake over and over and over, and they have to close North Beach. What's the answer to that? Because it's frightening. I mean, this last summer they closed it, I don't know how many times. Do they have to upgrade their system, or are they getting fined, or what happens in case of Burlington?
I think that mostly combined sewer overflow, right?
Combined sewer overflow.
So that would be wastewater infrastructure.
Oh, okay.
So basically, water gets into the sewage system.
Yeah.
And it overwhelms it. And so you have these outbreaks.
Who oversees that? What's the answer? Can they continue to do this without?
Well, part of the answer is to separate. It's not the sole answer, but actually separating the storm system from the sanitary system. That's part of the solution, but it's not always.
But what
do
they have to do? Can they let this go on year after year after year? Do they?
We are continuing to fund. We've been funding CSO projects since 1990, thereabouts. And we are continuing to. We've made a lot of progress, but we have not.
So they don't have to bond to put a system in or something?
Well, they also do treat. They have a separate outfall near the main plant. It's a swirl separator that does partially treat one of the overflow points, but there's not all overflow points that treat here.
Yeah, it just seems, and I agree with the senator. I mean, it just seems,
Some penalty or
the
something.
group of people that live there, You know, they have a lot to say in the state as far as everything to say in the state, but yet it seems just a little odd that they still have that problem, and it continually over and over and over again. And that's kind of one of my questions earlier was, are there more systems going in to keep that from happening? I mean, that's a Great Lake that receives all kinds of federal funding, and it just seems counterproductive to have that problem continually year after year without some serious penalty to have them come on board with a better way.
There's homeowners that have to put $50,000 into a home system to near the lake because the town will shut down.
Well, you look like what you're doing in your community as far as the monies that you guys have just bonded for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just surprising if Burlington continues, I'm not criticizing Burlington, but it's happening every year. This year, I'm sure it'll be again. You read the paper every day or whatever, it's overflowing. It's a disaster.
Can I add a couple things?
Yeah,
please.
Important context, I think. These systems are functioning the way they were historically designed to function. This is not a flaw of those systems, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Combined sewer systems were built before there were wastewater plants, where the whole role of the pipes was just to get dirty water away without a lot of concern, for whether it was stormwater or wastewater. The challenge then is those pipes run under lots of streets and lots of buildings, and so it's really complicated to do the kind of separation work Eric alluded to. Each one of the communities has what's called a long-term control plan at this point, which is a formal agreement with us on steps they're going to take over a set period of time to ultimately eliminate sewer overflows, recognizing the expense and also, frankly, just the logistical challenges of doing this work. As you may recall, in the FY22 budget, one of the ARPA initiatives that this body funded in support of our recommendation was to push $30 million additional dollars into sewer overflow abatement. Those monies have gone to, I think, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, 6 or 8 communities statewide, including Burlington, Rutland, and Montpelier, chief among them. I think we're down to the last couple dozen overflow points from over 100 in the early 90s. So really significant progress has been made. But the fact of the matter is the ones that are left are the hardest ones, which is why they're the ones that are left. The other piece to keep in mind as we encourage people to pursue separation projects is we need to make sure we're not trading a sewer overflow problem for a stormwater problem. Sewer overflows really only occur when there's a lot of rain or a lot of snow melt in a short period of time. During gentler rainfall events, dirty water washing off the streets and sidewalks is actually going to a wastewater plant and getting treated. So there's some real good that comes from those systems, and it's a balancing act. But each of those communities does have, and John's the lawyer, so I'll defer to him, but I would call it an enforceable agreement with the way they've signed on to their long-term control plans. It's a period of years, not months, that we're talking about to do this work, but they're all underway.
It could be years, though, for Burlington.
So our estimate had been, most of the long-term control plans have a period of 20 years. This is a consistent approach EPA has taken across the country. Our estimate of the price tag for completing the work when ARPA came around was about $60 million. We worked with the governor to commit $30 million to it, recognizing we couldn't do all of the projects immediately. They just weren't designed and ready to go. But we believe this will dramatically shorten the number of years it will take to eliminate.
When Burlington now the big dig, they're going to add like 400 more apartments. That's going to add 400 more sewers. So what's going to happen there?
So the wastewater, I would call it the dry weather flow, is a relatively small portion of what goes through a combined sewer system. Burlington isn't adding any additional combined sewers. The stormwater from that new development will go through a separate set of pipes.
And it is frustrating too, because I live in that area with a lot of lakes, and of course we don't have a lot of, the major towns have septic control But we spend so much money and time and so much of an emphasis are put on property owners that are around these lakes, as it should be, to control. I mean, you have the 250-foot back, you can't cut anything over 4 feet tall, and the phosphorus run out, impervious surfaces and stuff. It just seems there's a lot of attention on private landowners too, and I appreciate hearing what you've outlined, and I'm taking all that in to what I'm saying, but it just seems like there's a lot of people doing a lot of what they're supposed to be doing at their own expense, at their own level of, if you don't, you're in trouble. Yeah, it's frustrating to see that go on year after year. So that's where the frustration comes from.
And I hear you. And just Julie mentioned, I'm an attorney. I was the general counsel here. I spent most of my career doing environmental enforcement. And so it is very frustrating. But as Julie described, we as a nation set these things up, right? We all did. And we all frankly saved money because we did it. And so it just takes time. And really, when you use the enforcement tool, when you use penalties, things of that nature, it's when someone is failing to act. If they're not doing, but they're doing what they're supposed to do, it just takes a long time.
Yeah.
If they stopped and said, look, we're just giving up, we're not gonna do it, yeah, that may be for it. I mean, that's the reality of it. I worked for the AG's office, I worked for EPA, so you use it when they're not doing what they need to do, but when they're doing what they need to do, I know it's hard, but it does take patience, and it takes a long time. This is not a Vermont issue. Right. CSOs are a national issue. Every large city in the country is dealing with this. It's a big, big deal. Anything else on this one I can go to?
No, I think we beat that right to.
We want to beat that.
You got that right out of there. Yeah.
This one's pretty straightforward. This is the next row 101. Eric had talked about the base EPA grants. This is roughly $175,000 to provide 20% match to the base EPA grants for drinking water state revolving funds. This is available for a 2-year budget cycle. These are used again for low interest loans for public water systems and for loan administration and other DEC related expenses. Questions? Okay, we'll go on to row 102. We talked a little bit about dams. This is a very important dam. Waterbury Dam is this is both a public health and honestly it's a very important piece of state infrastructure because of the recreational opportunities it affords us all. So we need to fix it. So we're in the second year of a preliminary engineering study. It's being conducted by the Army Corps of Engineers. This is kind of an unusual. This dam was actually built by the Army Corps of Engineers, plus the DEC owns this dam. So the engineering study should wrap up in spring of 24. Design is supposed to commence in summer of 24 and end in the spring of 26, with construction to start in spring 26 and hopefully end in the fall of 28. So what we're looking for here is $4.5 million of one-time general fund money. This is the match. The Army Corps' $60 million dam spillway project. So again, we're leveraging a large amount of federal money with state money, and we think this will enable us to do this very important project. It's really high up on our list of priorities.
So we have a new committee and we spent a lot of time on it. I think Eric has helped us out last year quite a bit as far as, I think that it was surprising to me the amount of, as many dams as we own. Do we own 90 something? We're responsible for 90 dams.
About 100 dams.
About 100 dams. And there's a lot of them that are not in good shape. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so, yeah. I mean, I can imagine if something was to happen to that Waterbury Dam, that it probably would cause a lot of destruction.
It would be catastrophic.
Yeah.
It's serious.
This is by far the most significant dam in our portfolio. Many of the other dams we own are much smaller in size, but the Waterbury Dam is a pretty incredible asset.
That's a very good segue to my last row, 103. This is $1 million for A&R owned dam improvement projects. About 20 of our dams are currently classified as high or significant potential hazard dams. What this means is that failure or misoperation will probably cause loss of human life or economic loss. Again, these are public health issues. The funds will be used for improvements to state-owned dams to ensure that the risk posed by these dams are minimized to the extent practical practicable. These funds are needed to continue investment in risk reduction to the highest priority agency on dams, so we'll do it on a priority basis. Obviously, we have 20 that we gotta get to sooner rather than later.
Probably not too many new dams being built within the state.
That's fair to say, yeah.
Aren't you trying to get rid of dams too? Or someone's getting rid of dams, I know.
There, I've lost track of where we are.
Yes, there is an effort to.
Yeah.
The problem is that some of these are holding very valuable pieces of water with very valuable real estate and very valuable recreation areas that are, that have been there for a lot of years.
There's a tension because, sometimes dams make things worse, and that's something that we learned. We're humans, we think we can conquer the natural environment, we can't. And so sometimes having dams actually makes things worse. The river's gonna go where the river's gonna go. So part of it is just, it actually, in some cases, it makes more sense to take it up and to leave it in place, but there is a balancing to
And then
Yes, go
just one more, so the FERC process with the Connecticut River dams, are you handling that?
our agency.
Okay,
There's a
so-
number of pending matters.
Right.
I
So is there a contact person for that?
Yes, I mean, I think, trying to probably, Ed, right? Ed McNamara. Ed McNamara is the A&R General Counsel. I think he's kind of keeping track of all of our
Okay.
FERC-related matters. There's a number of people working on it.
Okay.
Ed should be able to answer.
Okay, just because the municipalities are preparing
Yeah.
and they're ready to comment, and it makes sense to comment with the state and to have more of a voice.
Yeah, a lot of licenses, they're typically 40-year licenses, so a lot of
Oh, I
licenses have
understand.
come up.
Right, we're just waiting for them to,
Yeah, so they
be
need to
active
be
on,
licensed.
yeah.
So there's a bunch of relicensing going on, and that's what triggers a lot of activity.
right,
But the 80s was a time when, because of incentives, folks were putting in hydro, and now, those dams are up for reasons.
oh, no, I understand. They just keep,
Yeah.
they keep selling them, and then that defers the process another couple of years. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So John, you mentioned Waterbury is like the number one. Can you list maybe the top 5 other, you said that you prioritized them.
So what's happening right now, so there's 20 agency owns it. DEC owns 14 dams.
Okay.
Waterbury is one of them. We actually, is one of what we refer to as 3 flood control dams. We have a relationship with the Army Corps. I think that's why they're putting the bulk of the money into the spillways for Waterbury dams. That project right now is estimated at about $6 million. Vermont was very fortunate with federal legislation that just passed where it reduced our share from 35% down to 7.1% of the cost.
Big difference.
So hence the $4.5 million that we're seeing right now. There are 20 dams in this sort of portfolio of high hazard and significant hazard dams, which is Commissioner Bielan pointed out. Those are the kinds of dams that could lead to loss of life if something were to happen. We're in the process right now of contracting with a third-party engineering consultant, the international engineering firm. If things go well, we'll have a contract signed probably in early February. And they're the ones who are going to do the sort of independent analysis of these 20 dams. We're hoping that that study will wrap up by the end of this calendar year. And based on that, we will then have some pretty good cost estimates and prioritize the dams. We have roughly $5 million from the ARPA funds that were allocated for this purpose, plus last year's $3 million roughly in capital funds, plus the $1 million that we're seeking now. So we'll have a fairly substantial amount of money to work with to sort of just go right at these dams once we've got that analysis.
We did have a list last year. You supplied us a list. If you could share that with the committee sometime, we'd appreciate that. And we could answer that
Is the
question.
Chittenden Dam owned by DC or who owns the Chittenden?
No, I don't think, no, it's not.
I mean, in 1947, we had a disaster in Rutland when it broke and went all the way down into the city.
I think it's an own company.
Oh, that
makes
sense.
Yeah, because they draw it down 25 feet every year, and that impacted the fishery.
Yep.
So that's what I recall.
I think you're
Find
right.
out exactly who it is.
No, I think you're right. Thank you.
Questions? Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Madam
Appreciate it very much.
One thing on the drinking water match, the 175K, that's the match to this next base rate. But we also, during the same 2-year cycle, will be getting the following year's grant that will occur during this 2-year biennium. So the total is about just under 2.4. Right.
So that's the 27
And
million.
that's what we refer to as our base. No, that's not the 27 million.
Oh, sorry.
It gets a little confusing, but that's our base grant on the drinking water.
Oh,
side.
the
And
four
then
and a half.
during this 2-year cycle, we'll be receiving 2 grants. It's the federal fiscal year 23 grant, which we'll be getting this summer, and then the 24 grant we'll be getting next summer.
So it does sound like we're, with this available monies coming, that we are going to be able to get ahead for years to come of making sure that our water supply, that we can make sure that we don't run into what a lot of states run into.
Yeah, we're in a very good position. I mean, we were very fortunate to receive some limited service positions over the next 5 years to really help us do this. I mean, our budget did double for a while, we need extra personnel to make sure we get these monies out there. So we're in good shape.
So, and there's no indication that we should take our foot off the pedal, but is our water good? Are we ahead of it? I mean, are we doing okay? I mean, we can do better. I mean, we got the funds to do better. We should do better.
Infrastructure wise, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
Yeah.
In terms of, surface water, we're making real strides. Secretary Moore's going to speak to the clean water projects. That's looking more at water quality. I'm talking real, just getting
Yeah.
water on people's taps and making sure it's safe to drink.
Right.
A major area of focus, in addition to just treatment, of course, we're dealing with PFAS and now lead service line removal. That's a big chunk of these new monies coming to us. But a big chunk of this is also going to just really basic rehabilitation of aging infrastructure. We've got a lot of aging pipe in the ground.
Well, boy, do we.
Can we spend a second on PFAS? Can we talk about that just for a second?
You got the right guy in the
I've
chair.
been spending a lot of time.
I can imagine,
No, I appreciate it,
I imagine that you have.
Yeah.
And is that is a chemical, human made,
Yeah.
and it's industrial, and it must be just something, and I heard it never dissipates.
Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't characterize it as industrial. Most of the problems that we see in Vermont are as a result of PFAS consumer products. Bennington is kind of the exception. Bennington was an industrial, it was aerial release, actually came out the stack out on the ground, into groundwater. Most of what we're seeing around here is really as a result, it's in so many products, and it gets into the environment, and that's why it's so challenging.
And what was it used for? What was it?
Its principal use is as a coating. It's a non-stick coating. Things like Teflon, Gore-Tex coats, Scotch Guard. Casella did a study a couple of years ago to figure out where the PFAS is coming from in the landfill. I think it was 60% came from couches. Just to give you a sense, it's not like people are
Just coating on the couches, to keep it from staining, yeah.
Not staining. So it's not. That's the thing. My career, almost every case I ever had, you got solvents. You say, okay, where's the factory that uses solvents? Where's the petroleum that got a gas station? You can track it down and then get them to pay for it, right? Eventually, it takes a long time, but that's the idea. PFAS, it's tough. It's very tough to determine where it's coming from. And a lot of times, it's coming from us.
Yeah.
It's not coming from misuse or any kind of bad act. It's just there.
So we have a major Burlington at Burlington High School, is that what they're investing in Burlington High School? No.
Oh, that's PCB.
Oh, okay, that's.
So no, they're bad.
Yeah.
No, they're John's favorites.
We have filed Vermont has filed a lawsuit against the manufacturers of PFAS, 3M and DuPont. There's 2 pending actions. One's in a multi-district litigation in South Carolina. One's here in Washington County. No, I think Chittenden County, in Washington County. I could have that wrong. In state superior court.
Good.
And that case is moving forward. So we're hoping. Yes.
So it's scary, isn't it? I mean, 20 years ago, we never even thought of, this was never even heard of, or maybe it was, or whatever, but makes you wonder what's the next big chemical, or what's the next big thing that's going to start attacking our environment. It is a little scary.
It is scary, and I think the really unfortunate thing here is that there is ample evidence that the manufacturers knew. They knew what they didn't tell us. So that's a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, thank you for that.
Thanks.
They were used to paint with
There's so
lead paint
many.
too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
No, they stopped using it?
It's pretty much done in the United States. It's being made, the problem with other countries is still,
Because I thought you could buy things with PFAS on them.
it's starting to become less and less common.
Okay.
You know, and there was a partial ban in I think it was the last section. That's where we need to go. We
Okay.
need to have a total ban on manufacture and import, and there has to be a national ban. It's never.
Right, we can't do it.
Unless one state can't do it. And we could do it in health.
California or some other state.
I think a lot of states, Maine did a very comprehensive ban, but they've run into a lot of problems with enforcement. It's not that easy. There's 3,000 PFAS compounds. So if you say all PFAS, some of them are benign. I mean, we've identified 5 in our state. Most people think that that's gonna end up being higher. It's 6 in Massachusetts. EPA, I think, is gonna have about 7. But it's harder than it sounds. But I think if there's a comprehensive national ban on imports, we'll eventually get to the point where we're not putting more into the environment. We still gotta deal with all the stuff that's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna come back up and close this
Yeah.
out, which is looking at section 10 of the capital bill. This is an interagency set of requests. And this is all related to the Clean Water Initiative. And so the Clean Water Initiative is housed within DEC, but it includes significant contributions from the Agency of Agriculture, from the Agency of Transportation, some smaller contributions from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, as well as this strong partnership with Vermont Housing Conservation Board. There is a Clean Water Board that includes 5 members of the administration. So the secretaries of the 4 agencies I named, plus the Secretary of Administration and 4 members of the public. That the primary responsibility is to sort of review progress and then make annual recommendations around budget and funding. The Clean Water Board for FY24 recommended $10 million in capital bill funding. This is a companion recommendation generally to a projected general fund budget. The Clean Water Fund receives 6 points from the rooms and meals tax, so 6% of that funding source. There's a 0.2% adder on the property transfer tax that goes into the Clean Water Fund, and unclaimed bottle deposits. So if you put your soda can in the recycling instead of taking it back to the bottle store, that nickel now comes to Clean Water. In general, most years we're seeing about $30 million across those 3 sources, in addition to the $10 million capital ask. As you can see, the governor's recommend exceeded what the Clean Water Board's request was. That is largely because the governor is recommending, similar to what John and Eric spoke about in terms of sort of pre-funding the opportunity if these federal bipartisan infrastructure law dollars exist. We offer companion municipal pollution control grants to municipalities to help buy down the costs of those loans. And so the governor is also recommending a significant infusion of funds into the municipal pollution control grants to match that federal infrastructure.
Is this
funding.
10 million buying some more funds, buying down some more funds?
It's buying down it's not that this 10 million does not leverage additional federal funds. It makes the loans more affordable for Vermont communities.
Okay, yeah.
You want
It
to
does
clarify?
actually serve as a match. Apparently, some of those funds are actually used for the Lake Champlain Basin.
Oh, correct.
So actually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is, so we have this partnership with the Lake Champlain Basin Program. Senator Leahy did also secure about $40 million in bipartisan infrastructure law for the Lake Champlain Basin Program to administer. They need state match, not to flow into their coffers, but they could point to as doing work in the same area. And as Eric just indicated, they rely on these municipal pollution control grants to fulfill that obligation they have. So the things that are comprised in this $15.9 million Clean Water Initiative are the match for the base clean water, which is the euphemism we use for wastewater, state revolving fund capitalization grants, the $10 million in municipal pollution control grants,
As Danny alluded to in her comments, there is $550,000 in the capital budget to support water quality related project work on forest roads. The Ag Agency uses this funding to help farmers build, in particular, manure pits, but also other barnyard practices. And this is $2.2 million of capital funds being recommended for these water quality grants. And then, as I noted, we have this strong partnership with VHCB. Their capital bill allocation is split between land conservation projects that have a real emphasis on water quality. And then they also have funding opportunities they make available, in particular to smaller farmers that just whose needs may not match any other existing program. The other piece that's sort of unique to the clean water budget is because the board by statute is given the responsibility for proposing the allocation of both capital bill and general fund dollars. There's just a $25 million placeholder in the budget for FY25, and the Clean Water Board will make that recommendation later this calendar year.
Is that 25 million on a line?
Oh, it's 10 million, I'm sorry, it's for FY25.
Oh, okay.
It's
It's like, that's a big number, I don't see.
No, it's just, we don't have that allocation of funds, and it's just by virtue of how the Clean Water Board goes about doing its budgeting.
Yes.
But I meant to ask this question before, so maybe I need to ask it differently, but we're getting more money than we typically have received for wastewater treatment and for drinking water plants.
Correct.
So either how many more do you anticipate coming online, your new plants, or perhaps you're prioritizing the rehab of systems? How does that work, or have you not decided
Well,
yet?
so I'll start and then let Eric help round out. We've estimated that there's about $2 billion worth of needs in our existing infrastructure that will come to be over the next 10 years.
2 billion.
2 billion over 10 years, right? So this is just things nearing the end of their useful life.
Yeah.
We have roughly $600 million between ARPA, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and sort of the standard state revolving fund money the agency receives from EPA over the next 5 years that we'll be able to put into this work. So we're gonna fairly well keep pace here for the next little while. Generally, the programs we've talked about here are largely focused on the repair and refurbishment of existing systems. Some of it's a little bit of expansion. There's a new sewer line proposed to go into Mallett's Bay that's being funded through the state revolving fund. So there are some new components. I defer to Eric on what the balance split is between old and new.
Well, new is relatively small, that's for sure. I can put a dollar figure on it. But when we think in terms of new, it's really new, but for existing properties. So even Mallett's Bay, essentially, it's running a sewer to pick up a lot of existing properties. Probably the biggest area or biggest initiative we have, we're essentially building brand new facilities for these village wastewater projects and the drinking water project in Killington. But there are roughly 10 or so communities right now that are in line to receive ARPA dollars, other funds as well. Most of these communities, these projects are extremely expensive. The communities could not possibly afford to build a treatment facility and a collection system on their own with their own funds. Even with the low interest loan dollars, they wouldn't be able to afford the use of these. So there are just a set of funds going into a number of these projects, of which ARPA is one of the major funds.
So the new treatment plant in Londonderry is an aberration?
It's one of those 10 or so systems that hopefully will get constructed. There's a lot of work just to get to the point of even identifying the solution. We're still in that phase right now with a number of these communities where they're looking for sites. They're all soil-based systems, they're not direct discharge facilities. So
I was wondering
it
about
presents an
that.
even greater challenge to find a site big enough that can support the kind of
capacity.
Okay, because this has impact on some things I'm working on, and we're working on a different committee, the economic development, housing, because we're looking at regulations that would apply in places with water and wastewater, with the assumption that there would be more places with water and wastewater, but that may not be a good assumption.
Back in the federal grant era, this precedes the loan program, communities were getting 90% federal and state funding for their projects.
Yeah.
By comparison, I mean, their local share was 10% for building something from scratch. So,
Yeah.
Are these wastewater systems getting smarter? Are they getting better? Are they still do it the old fashioned way?
The technology is improving. Yes. Methods have definitely advanced over the years. Sure.
Yeah, they're actually a fun tour. Winooski has a good one.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that was what I had hoped to cover.
Unless you have questions about the clean water budget.
Anything else?
No, I'm good, thank you very much.
I want to thank all of you. I mean, it's, you made clean water fun.
Should be.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, you made it fun and,
That's why I'm worried. I drink plain water.
oh, yeah. Well, you look good for being 36. Well, thank you. We want to thank you for coming in. If you could get Eric, you get the dam report to us, and I just found that fascinating, and appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay on for a minute.
Is your coat here?
No, it's snowing for you.
Yep.
You said it hasn't snowed enough.
Sugar snow. We got about, cut through the snow, and cut trees, and they still testing a lot of trees. Like, 8,000 trees tapped, that's not a lot, some people tap 50,000 or 8,000. 8,000.
So committee, I just want to apologize. I had a hard time following that when it first started. And Linda didn't do anything wrong, or I just would have thought that they would have had a little bit more for us to follow. Maybe it was just me. I just had a hard time following it where they were.
Oh, I
And
did too.
so,
That's
and so
why.
I'm gonna ask Linda the next time, anybody comes in, if they would just make sure, if they have the online presentation, because there were a lot of what they were talking about, we didn't have really any information on. We had to go dig for it. So just if we could be, I know from being, I have the experience of being in here from last year, and Senator Mazza's been here his whole life, as far as the committee and all that stuff, and they've done better presentations. They've included more. What they had on there just wasn't much.
Well, if you reference the book or this or both.
Right,
I think
and
it would
That
really
thing
help
kept
out
going
me.
off.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, so,
That is on your webpage.
right,
Any presentation that you see is on your webpage.
yeah.
But you would like to be more specific about?
Well,
This is the Bible.
everybody's been
Where you
good.
are, right?
Everybody's been good. I just didn't think that they really brought in, I think they could have, if they were coming in here and they weren't for sure they were gonna get the money, it would have made a difference to how I felt about some of that, a little bit. They're pretty much gonna get the money. But anyways, I apologize. I had a hard time following. If I have a hard time following, I know you new people have a hard time following it. But, appreciate you guys digging into it, finding it, and then being able to ask them the questions and all of that. So,
No, I totally agree with you. I had a hard time. That's why I was asking what they were talking about. What page.
yeah.
Yeah, it was not clear.
But they didn't seem to have this.
They didn't really have that.
So if somebody has to, maybe you can just ask them, bring this or
Refer to
or
that.
Yeah.
refer to this,
Yeah.
this Bible, because if they don't refer to the Bible, then I'm gonna be using to study.
Right. So,
I would
Right.
also refer to this major list.
yeah.
Right, they should.
Because there was just a lot of stuff that they brought in that they didn't have. I mean, yeah, you could find it, but they say a category, then they'd have 5 other things that we didn't see. And only
Right.
from what they brought up, or they didn't have it so they could put it on the screen.
We could also ask them to send us their notes or something similar, more explanation. if they
Well, when
like.
Louis Porter was there, remember him? He would come in and he would just put it there, and it was exciting. And it was, but so I apologize.
It's a different language.
Yeah.
I know. So, through.
Yeah.
They're gonna get it.
It's
Right.
really interesting.
I don't like the idea of continually continue to dump it every lane,
I don't
every day.
either.
If I was doing that in my home or anywhere else,
Yep.
or a development, you would do fine. You can shut down. But every year, Burlington's old. Keep building and building and building. And I know it's stormwater, but that doesn't explain the raw sewage going into the lake all the time. It overflows. And North Beach is right down the street. The public comes to swim. They shut it down last year. I can't tell you how many times. Over and over.
Closed more than it was open.
Every
Seemed like.
Everybody, I represent 27 miles of shoreline in Colchester. They're all putting sewer systems in, and we don't have town sewers. They're putting, upgrading 40,000, 50,000, but yet Burlington is pumping lanes and gallons all the time.
I'm involved in a sale right now. The septic system failed. And the homeowner to sell the house has put a 30,000 to.
Yeah.
And that sale isn't going through. And there's nobody paying that except for that homeowner. We had a senator last year that sold a house, Rutland.
Terenzini.
Yeah, Terenzini. I mean, he sold a house.
He had put one in.
Yeah, put one in.
Oh, yeah,
And so, yeah, I agree with you, Senator. I do. It's frustrating to see that, where, especially where they have so much say about the other state, the rest of the state, and what we do. And, yeah, I hear that. I do.